We're going to get started with the second half of our session. We have a panel, and our student, Mr. Jeremy Lane, will introduce each individual panelist. The panel will look at local involvement, because the movement is just not limited to Albany, but moved out to certain areas near Albany. So each individual will talk about their particular involvement in their various communities. Mr. Lane.
Good morning.
Good morning. Morning.
My name is Jeremy Lang. I'm a senior English major here at Albany State. And at this time, we will have a panel titled Southwest Georgia Perspectives on Civil Rights. And the panelists are Mr. James Jack Hadley from Thomasville, Georgia, Mrs. Mary Jo Haywood from Camilla, Georgia, Reverend Ezekiel Holley from Dawson, Georgia, Reverend Mathis Wright from Americus, Georgia, and the Reverend Dr. Gloria Ward Wright from Southwest Georgia. Atlanta, Georgia, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I guess I'm on first. I'm Jack Hadley, as I mentioned earlier. She introduced me, and first of all, I want to thank Dr. Hill for inviting us up here, and the staff of Albany State University. And I want to thank my wife, Chris. Show your hand, Chris. And also my grant writer, Melanie Mon, who's a professor down at Thomas University, for coming up this way as well. And I want to thank Dr. Richard Williams, who is my cousin, that's supposed to be over at the athletic department here in Albany State University as well, but he's not here, and so appreciate if he show up. You know, before I can really tell you what happened down in South Georgia, Thomasville, Georgia, I got to give you a little history about the things that happened prior to 1670, during slavery from to 1960 to 1865 up to 1970. 15 minutes not enough, but I'm going to do the best I can. I have to really tell you about my parents. My grandfather, Richard Hadley Sr., was born a slave in 1822 and died in 1910. He was married twice. My dad, Dennis Hadley, was born from the second set of kids, 7 children, and his first wife had 14 kids. So my grandfather died at the age of 65 and left, and the wife left him, his wife died when he was 65 years old, and left him with 14 kids to raise. So he in turn met my mom, my grandmother's mother, which was 16 years old, and he married her, and they had 7 kids. So that's how things work. 21 kids plus 5 on the outside before he got married to either one of them. But he was born a slave. He was a mulatto, and he had very privileges. In that bag there's a bullhorn there. Would you mind getting it out there for me? My grandfather, Richard Hadley, like I said, he was a mulatto, and he had privileges as being a slave, and those things followed on through to him until, he was a free man. So, but if you saw the movie 12 Years of Slavery, this is the bullhorn my grandfather blew those years during the time he was free as a slave. There was a lot of privileges here in Thomasville. A lot of people don't understand what happened. But again, I got to tell you a little about the history of Thomasville first before I get into it. Thomasville opened up back in 1825 and became the cotton king of the South. Our slaves was there to help make it an agriculture kingdom. So the plantation system had rigid rules for the expectation of the Southerners as well. Negroes is up at daylight, use the bullhorn signaled by the slave master or my grandfather during that time in this part of the region to wake up the slaves. And so there were several laws that protected the slaves. One in particular, in 1859, the mayor and the council of Thomasville, it said, "It shall not be lawful for any person or persons to confine or whip a slave or any free person of color in the streets of the alleys of Thomasville under the penalty of exceeding not $5. Still, in the time frame, Negroes had somewhat more flexible than in law indicated. Blacks began purchasing property in the north part of Thomasville during that same time. One of the cities, Dewey City, was developed. 1865, the Times Enterprise wrote a note saying that this is believed was the first speaker. Let me back up. He said that Times Enterprise wrote a profit that was a profit trade in eggs and butter and chicken and developed among the members of Thomasville black and white community with certain businesses coming out of Savannah. This was believed was the first speaking of blacks and white doing business together during slavery in Thomasville. As the Civil War became drawn to a close, lives of slaves in Southwest Georgia and North Florida continued to continue the years prior to the war. Was whispered among the black population with the newly transmitted of black ministers coming through telling them about the freedom of slaves. But before long, cleared that at least some of the white residents that the blacks would have to play a role in the kind of revitalization. Following the Civil War, they became to share common bounds. Thomas County did. Remaining found itself without money, bank, and the crushed reserves. But there were wonders if the free slaves would be willing to work. So in July 1865, the Times Enterprise editor wrote a note, says, Negroes somewhere cultivate a little patch, enough perhaps to buy his whiskey and tobacco, if may. But he will hire himself a white man to labor on the farm, but coffining a man contract. His knowledge of the law is very uncertain, and now that he has no fear of the lashes or care not for him of the future, he will labor to suit himself instead of the white man, and his character is too well known to predict that the service would long be retained by the thrifty white man. This opinion was not shared by Thomas Countyans, white and black. In June of 1865, Mack, a former slave, spoke to the group of females. The world would say you are lazy, you will not work unless you are free to do so. Show them that you require no master but necessity. The world say we are not honest and not reliable. Let us act in such a manner that our conduct would give to the lives to the uncertain. So this Thomas County began to be one of the first former slaves to speak out. But what little is known, the system of the dismantled land, the holdings in the South began to take place. The sharecroppers began to come along, and somewhere my grandfather Richard Hadley purchased his piece of land, which is about 300 acres of land during that same time as a free slave. Former Georgia's James Stewart questioned some of the small farmers in the salvation of the county, and the sooner the planters adopted, the sooner will Thomas County indeed be banner of county and be the banner of Thomas County. In other words, the farm agriculture. During the Reconstruction early days, many private owners, in desperate attempt to manage the vast tract of land, initially offered the property for sale. And the Freedom Bureau came down south and set up the Bureau of Commissioners, organized the meeting of the White Methodist Church here in Thomasville, where freedoms and white gathers to hear them explain the work agreement. Blacks were reluctant to really listen to what they were saying, but it took another black and the representative of the city to actually talk to them, to assure them that what the Freedom Bureau was doing, it was protect them and not to try to harm them. And they were not going to go back and work for another 7 years. Blacks in Thomasville, particularly in Thomasville, made an effort to become the political active during the first few years of Reconstruction. Many whites as residents believed that political equal was equivalent to the social equal, and they were not prepared to grant either to the black population. Georgia reject the 14th Amendment, which guaranteed black citizens of the right to and political rights. But blacks gained the right to vote following after the military had taken over state government, and the blacks in Thomasville formed what they call the Chapter Republican Party for the vote. Blacks 1867 and held a large meeting in April of the same year to promote good relationship between black and white. Several prominent whites in the community spoke together when they met with no incident. But during the Reconstruction period, religion played a key role in Thomas County during that time. Whites and blacks attended the same church, even though we sit in the back of it. Freedom Bureau again came along and authorized the apprenticeship of blacks children in Thomas County, the ones that was abandoned and was abused. Late 1870, there were several blacks began to own property. Had some invention, and the rough and ready plow was invented by Nelson Wood from Boston, Georgia. By 1870, blacks owned and managed their own property in Thomas County. Congressional confiscation of the Act of 1861 and 1863, where thousands of acres of Georgia land was taken away and was given to the distribution of the blacks, what we call the Freedom Bureau Act. In 1875, Thomas County, they have something like 2,155 black farmers and 562 white farmers in Thomas County. Prior to each proclamation, whether enslaved or free, blacks was not allowed to write or read. Many blacks view education as a symbol of free and success. Like the Freedmen's Bureau was involved in the effort to educate blacks immediately after the Civil War. Perhaps as many as 5 black schools were operated in Thomas County in 1867. Many of the white community were in favor of education for blacks, and the Episcopal Church in Thomasville opened a school for blacks that enrolled more than 2,000 students of all age. And another local effort in the public education began in 1873 when President of Thomas County Education Board, Lucky, and Board Secretary Herbert organized a meeting of the board eager to establish a school for whites and black. The board requested school but seek position for applications. In 1840, and 1880 brought an increase in school population. Thomasville, O'Clockner, Boston, Cairo, District of Boston, and Glasgow community all organized schools. At this particular time, in 1893, Thomasville was Thomas County was one of the 8 leading popular schools for districts. Second argument asserting that public education will result in taxing and the white community to educate black citizens. Other questions came about education of blacks, but eventually it all worked itself out. Attempt was to improve education. The black were pursued by leaders in blacks and white communities. In 1891, black community led James Atkins, Hamilton, Smith, brought that request Georgia governor to organize a college of blacks in Thomasville. These were joined by Thomasville town councilmen, the whites, but the effort failed. The American Missionary Society came down south somewhere around 1885. They opened up a school in Quitman. Unfortunately, it burned down. A normal school burned down 6 weeks later. So the American Missionary Society out of Connecticut again came, questioned Thomasville, and Thomasville opened its arms up, and they organized a school, American Missionary Society school, which is, Mrs. Martin will show you a picture of it. No, that's the one-room school that I attend. I missed that one. It's the one with, yes, at the bottom there. This is an American Missionary School that was opened up in Thomas County, and it operated from 1887 to 1933. And the students that went there, they learned all the necessary trades and stuff of that nature, that sewing, cooking, dressmaking, just unique living, nursing, all that took place at the American Missionary Society School. April 1870, in fact, there was white judge in Thomasville donated the 4 acres of land to Thomas County to set up a school. So somewhere about then in 1900, the national reputation traced the origin of 1865 was Thomasville was filled with refugees, military, and personnel camp. 1900, Thomasville became the northernmost visited and pressure place in the South. They started coming down south came over as a resort population of Thomasville. Wealthy people came and showed their assets. Black employment gained quite a bit during that time, during the Reconstruction period, coming on, back up, during the period of the Northerners came down, early 1900s, called the hotel era. Blacksmith, domestic workers, teachers, domestic railroad, dog handlers, construction work, all that took place. Great opportunity for the blacks in the South during that time. Members of the black community purchased property, again, I mentioned, in the north side of Thomasville from 1853 to 1857, down through 1864. Early during the 26 black neighborhoods that developed in northwest Thomasville, the growth experienced by black community was reflected in the number of black-owned, black-operated businesses in Thomasville. West Jackson Street in Thomasville had become one of the black commerce districts during the late 19th century and was a thriving community. This included the Civic Color. This includes the City Color Hotel located on northwest corner of West Jackson Street. Variety of housing style sites reflect the small but growing black middle class. By 1920, Thomasville black community counted doctors, nurses, insurance agencies, teachers, ministers, and business owned among the leading citizens. West Jackson Street became the commercial center for black community, restaurants, dry cleaners, shoe repairs, groceries, and quite a few other businesses throughout the community. 1920 was a slowdown also during the stock market crash in 1920, and 1920 drew a close to the Depression. Years began, farmers lost, and opportunity was lost as well. Some black was fortunate enough to retain employment on Thomas County Plantation during the early 1930s. Lived there, and they lived better than the ones down town. Pepper Plantation, the one that I grew up on, was was an example of many Thomas County blacks with various types of employment as well as education opportunities. On Pepper Plantation, Mrs. Pansy Allen opened up a two-room school and had two schools, and both of them was two-room schools. Just that many blacks on the plantation that survived during that time, during the period and my father, Dennis Hadley, worked on that plantation for 53 years. And yes, that's a two-room school that I attended when I was going into the 3rd grade. Yes, thank you, Ms. Mark. Her interest in employment provided food and shelter as well as living conditions on the plantation and doctors and nurses on the plantation for the students. It was a well-organized public education. Thomasville black community began in 1902 when the Durham City Public School was opened. Leaders of Thomasville Black Public School, Brantley and Mr. Smith, first two principals in that area. Time? Okay, can I just, I'm gonna just one little second, let me just.
We have to limit it to 15 minutes.
Okay, can I just close it out?
Yeah, close it.
Okay, let me close it out real fast. In the 1920s, 1930s, they formed a biracial committee in Thomasville. That was in the 1920s. The biracial committee went in and they pulled together a black community. The churches pulled together, and I had to get that piece back. They pulled together, they worked together, worked out all the problems in Thomasville among the black and white community. Then they went and dominant, and then in the 1940s, they came back again because of the draft in the military. Blacks was denied going into the military during the 1940s. Then they pulled things together. Then in the 1960s and 70s, the biracial committee came together again, and they worked with the black community in Thomasville in the education part, making things go through smoothly. And then during the integration period of Thomasville, there was no bloodshed at all because the biracial committee of white and black came together and they worked things out. That was a sort of like the committee behind. And then when the 1970s came along, they formed again, they worked behind the scene, and everything worked on real smooth. So Thomasville was not like Albany, not like Savannah. When Dr. King was assassinated, we maintained, in other words, they worked together to pull things through. I could go into more details, but 15 minutes is just not enough to be on a panel to discuss the issue of what happened during that particular time in Thomasville. It's very important. So all I can say, come to Thomasville, come to visit the museum, you can see more about what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Banks. I'm going to flip the protocol script a little, because first I want to welcome all the students who are here, the young folk, because really this is about you all and what you all are going to do now that we're passing the torch to you all. Victor, like I wrote in your book, I told you to prepare yourself because each of you will be called like we were called. And you just need to be ready when you are called. But I have to say thank you to Dr. Hill, my English teacher, Dr. Banks, Albany State College, and again to the young people, Albany State College, Albany State University, I'm telling my age. Albany State University prepared me well, and I thank Albany State for the time that I had here. On November 6, 2007, I was elected mayor of Camilla, the first female and the first black to hold that position, to be elected that position. But Camilla's place in history did not start there. On September 19, 1868, there was an event called the Camilla Massacre, where blacks asserted their rights. Were going to a political rally, and as they entered the courthouse grounds of Camilla, they were met with hostility. Several of them were killed.
Yes.
Learning of that incident, I learned it here at Albany State, and learned in Dr. Fumwell's class. I thought I was a student to what had happened in Camilla. But I learned of the Camilla Massacre there, and I became enthralled with that story, especially because one of the persons who killed there was a black woman holding a child. So she became my inspiration throughout my campaign when people were telling us that we could do. In Camilla, we got to November 6, 2007 because in 1968 we had formed a partnership with the NAACP. It was very instrumental in what happened in Camilla, the NAACP. There was also a partnership there with a church, Union Baptist Church. And today we don't have those kind of churches. It was very important. Union opened its doors for our meetings, our protests. We came to Union to pray before we marched. We went out. Whatever we need, Union provided. So Union Baptist Church is very important to our history. Whenever you look through the scrapbook, you'll see we had key leaders in our community that were very important to our success. Edward Brown, a lot of you all might have heard of Edward Brown, no Reverend Holley had, and Clayton Marcus. Those things were key to our success. We tested the system. Everybody told us that voting was important, so we tested the system. I first ran in 1972 for an office they called ordinary back then. It was a countywide office, and of course we got soundly defeated, but we learned from that run. We learned. So we went back, and we knew we had to register again. We had to get into the system in a deeper way. One of the things we did, there were 3 lawsuits that are going to be very important in the history of what happened in Camilla. There was a lawsuit against the jury pool in 1976 because a lot of us were going off to jail and we didn't have anybody on the jury. So we sued in federal court and we won that suit to have the jury pool rewritten. 1979, we sued the Board of Commissioners, the probate judge, and the school board for the right to district vote because our votes were being diluted at large. Won that lawsuit that led to the number of blacks we have now on various boards and commissions and on seats. In 1979, I filed an EEOC complaint against the city of Camilla because jobs weren't advertised. Blacks couldn't move up to supervisory positions and won that suit. So now we have several blacks on supervisory positions in Camilla, and hiring is a little bit more balanced. But from that, we still had to go back. After each victory, we met new resistance, and always sent us back to voting, to registering, and to voting. Still, like I think Dr. Anderson said, believing in the system, in a non-violent system. And after each massive voter registration drive, we did another test of the system. In 1979, Ed Brown actually was the first black who ran for mayor. And Ed won the election at the polls. We numbered at the poll, but we got trapped with the absentee ballots. So we were new to all of this. We were learning at each step. But we learned about those absentee ballots, and that was going to be crucial 29 years later when I would run. So we still, to the day he died, we call Ed Brown Mayor Brown. Yeah. Because he knocked down, the walls that he opened. In 2000, we had a black law office open there because, again, blacks were outnumbered when it came to going to jail, and we felt that we needed our people to be represented when we had the Black Law Office. And I have to give the shameless plug. My son-in-law was a lawyer there who ran the office, Johnson Husband. When I decided I was going to run in the resistance we met, one thing that helped us, and young people, you remember this, you always believe and take advantage of other people's disbelief. That's right. One thing that helped me to win, I think, the race, other people just didn't believe we could do it. People, they discarded the race. We had a poor campaign. We had no money. My campaign manager was a factory worker. One of my campaign lieutenants was a student here at Albany State. Another was unemployed, and they laughed us off as just a vagabond group of people up there trying to defeat who was a giant in politics, the person against whom I ran. But we believed that was the important thing. Yes, yes. And another important thing was key, we outworked them. So always remember, it was in the classroom, politics, or wherever, work is key. When people asked me what was the key to our success, so we worked our tails off. I used to get tired sometimes of the committee coming and saying, we got to go to this community and that community. We took no community for granted. It was not a black community-based campaign. We went in Van Acres. We went everywhere they said, y'all going there, because I was running for mayor and I was going to represent all the people, so we went to all of the communities. We met the resistance. We had the signs pulled up. We got the letters from the Klan, but because we do feel that our race and our campaign was a God-ordained campaign, we weren't afraid of the Klan. When the GBI came and said, do you need protection and all that, I told them, you see where I live in the hood. I have all the protection I need. And we were able to not only pull it off. In fact, Ruth, I asked them, I said, if the Klan come over here, they are the ones who like the protection. But of course, once I got in office, or once we got in office, that didn't stop the resistance. I tell people all the time, I really just want to go meet President Obama just to give him a hug. And people say, why you want to do this? I tell them, boy, I know what you're going through. Because no idea you bring to the table, every idea was brought with resistance, we met with resistance, I knew the censure, and we want to vote you out of office. I understood all of that, but the more resistance we met, the more determined we became to finish out that race. And I'm going to save the part to where we going next so that we'll stay on time. I use that, I have ideas about that, but I'll save that time for the question and answer. And I want to go back to where I started by keying in on my young people, that you are the new answers. Don't let anybody diminish your character, diminish your work. You all are the ones who are going to have to take up. Always put God ahead of your efforts. Don't fear. If you're right and you have God ahead of your efforts, what the Bible said, no weapons formed against you, will prosper. And you will succeed. Thank you.
To Dr. Hill and all that's responsible for this program, and I guess we have been taught if you don't know where you come from, it's hard to know where you're going. I am just proud to be sitting beside the mayor, Mary Jo Haywood. I met Sister Haywood some years ago when she was working with Georgia Legal Services as a paralegal, and over the years that she has certainly stood her ground in Camilla and fought it for her people, and she should be commended for that. I want to be brief and talk a little bit about Terrell County. I'm kind of like Dr. King. I come from, and my wife is here. My wife is here. I want to recognize my wife. She is here. And we have one daughter, Tabitha. She is a junior at Spelman, and right now she's abroad in India. And hopefully that she will prayerfully get back for her senior year next year at Spelman and get involved and try to help change the world, they say. Young people, I want to say briefly a little bit from Terrell County. I am from a family of preachers. My grandfather was a pastor. My father was a minister, and I've been in the ministry since early 70s. The Terrell County, I want to talk to you briefly first about the Civil Rights Act of 1957, when there was some 41 residents of Terrell County went to apply to register to vote, and only 6 of those citizens was able to pass the test. And a few of those are still alive. We have a number of school teachers that was a part of that 41 persons that went and to register to vote. At that time, some of the teachers lost their jobs, and we had an activist, Mr. D.U. Pullum Sr., at that time fought very hard. He was the president of the NAACP in Terrell County to get those teachers their jobs back. And we are standing on someone's shoulders now that was trailblazers. I want to say the Civil Rights Act of 1957 in Terrell County brought a lawsuit from the Justice Department down in Terrell County, and we're standing on the Sherrod shoulders because that brought Charles Sherrod and SNCC into the South because of that federal lawsuit that was filed. Now, in that period, there was 4 churches that were burned in Terrell County. I think it was Mount Olive, Mount Mary, I Hope, and I can't remember the 4th one, but I think it was up somewhere around Broward. Those churches was burned down because SNCC and those groups that was coming in using those churches to try to get people motivated so they could participate in the judicial system. I think Albany was the hub, but there was Terrell County, Lee County, Worth County, and Calhoun County was in this hub. And I met one of the former editors of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution at that time did his thesis on the civil rights movement here in Albany and the surrounding counties. Now, after the churches was burned down between 1957 and 1960, then there was a lot of protesting going on, and Terrell County was a county that was very racist, and there was a number of people of color that was killed, and Dr. Kavanaugh and his students from Emory came down, I think it was last year, and they did a study on cold cases, and there are some cold cases in that period between 57 and 60s of people of color that died, and there has not been any closure to those cases. And as a longtime officer of the NAACP, that we had a committee on studying cold cases, and there was 159 cases that was pending in the state of Georgia without any closure. One person of color was pulled up out of the river in Macon with handcuffs on, no closure. So there's a lot of folk, young people, have lost their lives for the cause of human rights and civil rights. And I want to encourage you and young people who have not seen the picture Selma to go and see it, because there's a lot of truth in it, where our people has made great sacrifices. I want to move on here on voter registration. In Terrell County, there was no elected officials in Terrell County until the late 70s or the early 80s. Now, in 1957, there was a landmark trial in Terrell County that drew national attention, the Dawson Five, and they got the name the Terrible Terror. There was 5 young men underage that was incarcerated for 18 months for a capital murder trial. And those young men was threatened and coerced into saying if they didn't confess to the crime that they was going to be castrated. This was in the mid-70s. And we got involved and got Miller Former and Tony Axum down and Team Defense, and the Council of Churches got these young men a bail, and they was freed because they only had coerced testimony that come from them. And I remember very clearly that civil rights lawyer, Attorney C.B. King, and his children and other that attended this trial, a landmark trial in Terrell County. But in the mid-70s, the late 70s, that there was a class action suit filed by Lucius Holloway, commissioner now, and also he was a part of that 41 people who was denied the right to register. But later on, the other 41 was able to register, but he kept fighting and brought a class action suit, and they won that suit in Georgia Middle Court. And the first elected officials that was elected in Terrell County was Robert Albritton and Lucius Holloway and Mr. Abraham Breedlove. They was elected to the city government, and that kind of opened the doors of the elected officials in Terrell County. Terrell County has come a long ways, but we still have a long ways yet to go. I want to just say here that I don't have all of the history, but we are continuing to fight for what others have died for, and to do voter registration, to try to get people registered so they can participate. President Lyndon Johnson, when he signed the Civil Rights Bill, the Voters' Rights Bill in 1965, President Johnson signed the Voters' Act in 1965, said, "The vote is the most powerful instrument ever devised by man for breaking down injustice and destroying the terrible walls which imprison men because they are different from other men." And I believe, Sister Harris, if most of our young folk would take this serious, that they would go out and they would vote. We are still being challenged by Republicans is to turn back the hands of time. They're still setting roadblocks to try to keep people of color and low-income folk away from the polls. Because they know if we go to the polls and we vote, we can bring about a change. And I want to be brief. I can't talk 15 minutes, because if I talk 15 minutes, I'll start trying to preach. Let's church and praise the Lord. Last year, in I think it was April, that I couldn't find anyone that would step to the plate and run for the 151 House seat. And my child said to me, she said, Daddy, this seat cannot go unchallenged. And I said, well, at my age, I don't know, I need to get involved. She said, we got about the age, get involved. And I had went up to Atlanta, and I qualified on Friday afternoon at 11:45 to make sure that if anybody else qualified, I wouldn't qualify. And I came back to Dawson, and that Monday, our Governor Deal came to Dawson and my opponent and pledged $12.7 million for a youth detention center. And the first thing I thought, if this was put in on the front end, you wouldn't need it on the back end. Too many of our young folk are already poised for jails and prisons.
Yeah.
This is something that we got to tear those walls down because a mind is a terrible thing to waste. And right now that I'm involved with the NAACP and the church and Masonic order and every other order to try to encourage us to do more for scholarships, to try to keep our young people in school and to try to keep them engaged and go on into higher education so they can become our future. Now we're standing on the shoulders of brave soldiers who was willing to die for the cause. But I don't see too many brave soldiers around anymore. So we got to stand up and be counted. Terrell County has a really dark history of people being killed and people being dehumanized for their human rights and civil rights. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm from Americus and Sumter County, Georgia. And Sumter County was then a hellhole, and it's still a hellhole. Now, our theme today says that to this we have come and where. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about where Americans have came from, but then I'm going to tell you where we as a people still need to go. Now, Americans have a population of about 1,700 people. And at one time, at the turn of the century, Americus was the 8th largest city in the state of Georgia. And in many areas, it was also known as the metro of southwest Georgia. And it was because of all of the plantations and all of the large cotton field and the cotton distribution and the railroad had came in. And even to this day right now in 2015, Sumter County has more millionaires than any county in the state of Georgia. So they were deeply rooted and packed in and didn't want to change, and they still don't want to change. Now, a little history. In 1913, there was a group of young black males, and one of those black males was named Will Redding. And you know how we complain now about stop and frisk and police brutality? Well, that's what happened to Will Redding. He and a group of young black males were standing on the corner of Cotton Avenue and Lamar Street. And the then chief of police, which was Chief W.C. Barrow, asked the young black males to move away down the street because they were too close to the white side of the street. All of the black young males complied, and remember, complied, except for Will. So, the chief then approached Will, attempted to arrest him. A struggle broke out. Then the police chief took out his gun, hit Will on the head, but Will was the better man. Will took the gun, shot and killed the chief of police, and then he was chased down, shot, beaten, and jailed. Well, later that same evening, after the good white folks got liquored up, they went, broke into jail, dragged Will out into the street of Versailles. And then it was just not that they killed him, but it was how they did it. They used crowbars and hammers. And that was in 1913. And that ain't been that long ago. Now, during the Civil Rights and Human Rights movement, America was in great turmoil. It was a lot of violence. The movement was organized by the late Reverend J, and the J stand for Joseph R. Campbell, in 1963. And the mission at that time, and the mission of most movements at that time, was to end racial segregation. And I think each and every one of us will agree that that was accomplished. Racial segregation has been eliminated, but racism has yet to be eliminated. Justice for us has yet to be accomplished. So understanding that what the goal was and whether or not the movements were successful or not, you would have to say yes, the movements were successful. Now, in 1961, the Reverend Martin Luther King spent a weekend in the Americus, Georgia courthouse jail. And that was after he was arrested here in Albany, Georgia. Now, so what we have done in there and moving forward to now, this April, matter of fact, there will be a ceremony where we have successfully been able to secure a historical plaque and the reassembling of that jail for a permanent state to be put on the grounds of Sumter County Courthouse lawn to remember that Reverend King was there in Americus in jail. And when we were fighting to name the street after Reverend King, we didn't want to put it in the black neighborhood. We were blessed because we stood up and we got the main street change in there. So those are like when you start the fight and you got to continue the fight. Now, there were several cases in America that brought attention, but one of the most notable ones, and I noticed it Saturday. It was posted over in the over there in the museum, where the 30 black young females were arrested. And the only reason I'm bringing that up now is that I haven't been able to confirm it yet, but I was told just recently that there is also a movement to go and reserve, restore, and make that Starcade, where those 30 girls were jailed, also a historical monument, and that it will be there forever. So we hope that that takes place. Now, in changing racial segregation in America, it came relatively fast when you look at terms of fast, because when it started really in 1963, by 1965, there were 2 black policemen. And by the fall of 1964, under the so-called Freedom of Choice Plan, there were 4 black students who entered the all-white America's high school. So even with all of that, they were pressing forward, and by the end of 1964, there were over 2,000 black African Americans in Sumter County registered to vote. And that is, when you consider in 1964, and then when I look at the numbers today, from 64 to 2014, we have only increased that number by 2,000 people. And that's a crying shame before God Almighty. Because as we move forward, see, the movement or the vision doesn't need a new one. As we say in church, we need a revival. We need to renew it. We need to start back pressing again about getting people out to vote. And it's not on the national level. We have to start on the local level, just like we did in that day. We have to focus on our local elections. It's important who we have as our DA. It's important who the sheriff is. It's important who our mayors are. And if they don't, and I ain't saying show us favor, but if they don't do what is right, and I ain't even talking about fair, because I've learned that you can be fair and still crooked as hell. So I want somebody that's going to do right. So if they don't do what is right, then we make them a what? A one-term person that they get to serve one time. Because what? We have control of the voting view. And we go and we organize and then we go vote. Then the other thing is about teaching our young people about behavior. That when they are approached by police officers. Now, you look at what happened over in Ferguson, you look at what happened in New York. I can even look at what happened in Americus, Georgia just a few years ago. But your argument still remains the same. In other words, instead of me having to fight when you started not complying, that you became what? You obstructed justice. You interfered with the police officer. I don't want to have to fight that. We shouldn't have to fight that, because your main argument is that he had no reason or she had no reason to stop and frisk me. So we have to educate them on how they are to comply with their commands, and if you comply, then it gives us a better opportunity to make the justice system be just. Because right now we are fighting a justice system that is so far from being just, it is just like it was in 1964. Because we don't see the signs, but if you sit in my seat, you see the signs are still posted every cotton-picking day. Everybody want to talk about terrorism, but nobody want to address the quiet racism that we have to deal with every day on every level in all walks of life. Don't care whether you rich, poor, homeless, motherless, or whoever you are. Because God said what? That the poor will be with you always. And they will certainly be here, but it's up to us to revive our movement. And I'm going to end with what one of the great prophets said, Amos. Amos said in 5:24, but let judgment run down as waters and righteousness as a mighty stream. And until that happens, people, until we reconnect and until we join hands together again and truly sing as Reverend sings that old Negro hymn and that old thing about we shall overcome, because we have not overcome. The fight is still at hand. God bless you.
There's an advantage in being last, and there's a disadvantage in being last. But somewhere I read, the last shall be first, and the first shall be last. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. That's right. I want to, first of all, give yourselves a hand for sitting there and hearing us all. Because each one of the persons here on this panel, I'm sure that there is so much more that can be told. And as I sat here listening to the presentations, I came to the conclusion that all of my pages that I had, and I got up this morning at 5 o'clock writing and writing and writing, I said, well, wait a minute. Didn't you put all that in one book? That's right. So I'm going to make it real easy on myself and share what I said back then is what I say today with a few changes. But before I do that, I'd like to first thank Albany State University, and I'd like to thank so much Dr. James Hill? L. Hill. L. Hill, isn't it? I would like to thank him as the chairperson of this symposium. Give him a hand, because and all those who are working with him. I want to just say that I taught high school for 25 plus years, and I've been in ministry and a pastor for 27 years. Now, I know I don't look 27, but you know, that's okay. I mean, it's not all of LA, but it's the glory of God that I share on my face. But I just want to say to you today that I'm happy to be here at Albany State University to see all the changes that have been made. And I'm also happy that I had this opportunity to come via my public relations / personal assistant, Sister Shafroni. Would you just let them know who you are? She actually wanted to know what was going on at Albany State, and she said, you haven't heard of Dr. Gloria Ward Wright, who is actually from Albany, Georgia? And of course, I thank you for that. And I thank my sister who has been, as they say, lugging me along every day in her car, and I came early to go to church with her. Now, all that being said, thank you for coming. Let me just say this before I get into how I'm going to disperse this information. I want to thank those persons who helped me as I grew up. Sister Harris. I'm sure there are a lot of Harrises somewhere. But I want to thank all of you for helping me to get to this point in my life. After telling you that I have been taught years, I have over 10,000 students out there somewhere. Some of them are in vocations. Some of them are teachers, doctors, lawyers, an author, a psychiatrist, and I keep up with them via Facebook and all the other means of social media. But I want to say that I'm glad that I am a product of Albany, Georgia. I say Albany, Georgia because I've traveled, but when I was here it was Albany. As a matter of fact, when I tried to book a flight here, I ended up almost with a $1,000 ticket because they said, you're going to Albany, that's what it costs. And I said, are you sure? Then I had to make sure they knew it was Albany. Then I could get a better flight. But I'm glad that I'm here representing Alice Coachman and Ray Charles and all of the famous people who are from Albany that you never hear about. And I said when I spoke at the Civil Rights Museum, you need a bigger sign at 75 so people will know that Albany State University is here and that Albany is here. That being said, let me move to something else. What are we going to do about the fact that we still have some of the same problems that we had in 61, 62, 63, 56, whatever? It's the same old soup warmed over. So let us not get it twisted. Yeah, we say we shall overcome, and we sang it, Sister Rutha.
Yes, we do.
One day, I say, someday, they said someday. We say we must overcome today.
We will.
We have to overcome today. And today is late. So I want to just say this. Please let us continue to teach our children. The Bible tells us to train up a child in the way he or she should go. When he's old, he will not part from it. We must teach our students African American history. African American history, that's right. African American history is more than a month.
That's right.
We used to have a week. Then it went to a month and they thought, well, they're satisfied. No. Every day is African American history.
Textbooks.
Because of the fact of our contributions, having laid the foundation in Washington, D.C., and the cobble streets of Savannah, we've made our impressions in society. But it seems that we're always still the last, sometimes the lost, and the least. I've come by to tell you just a few things so that you'll invite me back. You know how to give you appetizer? A little bit. You go to the malls, and the Asian people are very smart. They say, "Would you like to try a little bit of sesame chicken?" And so you get a toothpick and you taste that chicken. So I'm hoping that today you will get a little taste of what I can offer the students here at Albany State University. It was Albany State College when I was here. That being said, let me move to something else. I've written a book about my experiences in Albany, Georgia. So it's not about the civil rights movement, whereby I went to jail 4 times. And by the way, I went to jail 4 times. There are people who went to jail 42 times, 24, 36, 12, 8, 10. So it's not about going to jail, because there were people who were helping to get people registered to vote. There were people on the sidelines making placards with "We shall overcome" on them. There were people who took people to try to get them registered to vote. I want you to know that we as a people have paid a great, great sacrifice to get where we are today. And then to know that we're not where we are supposed to be yet. And I want you to understand something. Now I understand about Harriet Tubman and all the others, and who carried a rifle to get folk to do stuff. I mean, really, sometimes you have to be hit upside the head to know that you don't have all your rights. So it wasn't until my instructor, and we call them teachers in the day, Miss McCree Harris, who was my homeroom teacher for 4 years, and my French teacher, told us, "You need to get involved, young people." I was at Monroe High School then. Because of her insisting on us getting involved in civil rights and in the Albany movement, I am where I am today. But you don't know my story. We've been reading books, and they were called his story books. Well, I've written a her story book. Okay? Thank you. This book, just to give you an idea, so that you'll know some of the things that happened to me in Albany, Georgia. And believe it or not, my husband said, "Did you have to put everything in there?" He said, "You put everything in there except the kitchen sink." And I did. Because people know you. And they'll say, "Oh, she didn't tell it all." Well, I think I told it all. But anyway, the first chapter, "A Jailbird Can't Fly," talking about my experiences in jail with some of you who are here. Riding in the paddy wagons. Our children don't know what a paddy wagon is. I asked one day, "Do you know what a paddy wagon is?" in one of my speaking engagements. He said, "Paddy wagon?" No, I don't know what a paddy wagon is. We have to teach them what happened in the past. That is history. So that they will know from whence they've come, so they will know where they're going.
True.
Did you get that? So for us to bring up our children saying, "Well, you can just get your TV tray and eat your dinner in your room, and you can go in the living room, and you can go in the kitchen," we need to come back to the dinner table like Mama and them did with us and talk about things that are going on. That's what it means to say train up a child in the way they should go. Teach them right from wrong. So I say to you young people who are saying, "Well, we're going to do something about all of these murders by the police and all of this brutality." I feel the way you feel, badly, that we're still being treated like animals. But this is what I want you to know from this old lady. You must understand there are God's laws and there are man's laws. And people who have guns and who have the right to arrest can get you convicted of a felony overnight. That's right. The difference between the students of my day and you I can show you was this. We had mass meetings where we talked about the issues at hand. We talked about how we would approach those issues, where we would march, when we would march, and how we would resist arrest. And we were told that you will be arrested because, first of all, you're obstructing justice according to the laws on the books. You're parading without a permit. So there were a list of charges then. Today, there are still a list of charges. So you have to be wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove. So when you go and lie down in the streets of 85, if you're not with a group that's going to support you, you're going out there by yourselves, you are at risk. You can go and quote me on this. You can take that to the bank. Because you could be killed, number one. I'm not saying don't be active. I heard young people say, well, my mama went to jail, my dad went to jail, I'm gonna do something with my life too. Yeah, but we had a plan. Write the vision down. Get the vision up here, but you must have a vision. You must have a plan. We had people, did we not, to get us out of jail? Who will get you out of jail if you went on your own? So there are God's laws, a man's law. Yes, in Albany, Georgia, there were those laws that were segregated laws. No, in other words, white only water fountain. White ladies restroom. Black women, get it? Restroom. When we get to the service station, Mom and them went into the service station to pay. Leave Dad in the car because who knows? He may not come back. We understood. When they tell you the restroom is right back here behind the gas station. The Arctic Bear, you don't know about that. You still know about Jimmy Hot Dog. But the Arctic Bear had this big, beautiful polar bear going around and around, and they were serving ice cream, milkshakes, banana splits. I was a grown woman before I realized that, hey, the reason you didn't get a banana split was your parents didn't have the money. Not for 6 or 7, 8 children. So then you need to get educated so you can feed your children the things that they like. I'm going to say this. We have got to teach our children what happened. We have got to teach our teachers what happened. How can a teacher teach children social studies and they don't know about the Civil Rights Movement? They don't know. And you know what's so important? No, don't get me carried up. You know what's so important is that when they don't know, they play it off like they do know. You ever been like that? Well, you know, they say, did you know that? No, I didn't know that, but I don't want to tell people I didn't know that. So I'm saying this. When I taught high school at Harper High School, Mays High School in Atlanta, Monroe High School here, Westover High School, when I left here to go to Atlanta to teach, Dr. J. Jerome Harris had several teachers to be on a committee to do what we call an infusion of African American history into the curriculum. Why? Because there was no mention of all the contributions that African Americans had contributed. So you had to have an insert. Hello, somebody. And when I was here, the books that I used at Monroe High School, I'm teaching American history and I look and see my name, Tater, Rabbit. Everybody's name, because the books have been used, recycled over and over and again. Went to the movies. Hey, I forgot the name of the movie theater. What was Albany? You go to the movies, you pay the same thing white people pay. But they go through the front door. You had to go through the back door and go up about 5 or 6 flights of stairs. And then when you get upstairs in the balcony and watch the movie, you want some popcorn? Sure, you can have popcorn. It's the popcorn we brought from downstairs. That was stale. We knew that. That's why some of the kids, I didn't do it though, they would spit seeds all on folks' head downstairs. I'm just telling you like it is. It's just that simple. Now, let me just say this. This book, which I won't get a chance to tell you about, I'll just do this. A Jailbird Can't Fly, Chapter 1. Moving Through the Line, My Journey. 3, headquarters at my Mount Zion. You know about Mount Zion, used to be the church, and Shiloh, where we had mass meetings. Cheerleader for Justice, that's what I call myself. Dr. King was a drum major for peace. I was a cheerleader. We had to get to the church, let Ruth May and everybody sing, and we had to get the people revved up to want to march. You just don't get out in the street and march. You got to be getting that adrenaline going to march. You got to know what the facts are to march. And then here it is, life lessons. I have life lessons in here. Why did I do this? So that my son and all the sons and daughters of those who march with me can read this book when I'm gone to where I'm going. And I pray I'm going to glory. Hello, somebody.
Hey.
Then 6, Gloria and Kay, forgiveness and friendship. That's a long story about a white girl who was 18, I was 16. At the time of the movement, we're marching with all of the leaders as youth from Monroe High School, Carver Junior High School, Albany State, at that time college. As we're out there marching, I was interviewed by somebody from the Associated Press. He quoted me as saying, "I love my chocolate-colored skin. I still do." He interviewed her, and she said the best thing that these black children, well, you know what she called, but anyway, the best thing that they can do is clean up Harlem. Do you know that that white girl one day found the Lord, became converted, and after 35 years of having said that statement, she found me after 35 years in Atlanta, Georgia, and apologized to me. And I invited her to my church to speak. We're still friends now. I mean, that comes from a long ways. Number 7, response to Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech, 43 years later. So now you see how old the book is. I didn't know, but this book is going to be a classic. The reason it's going to be a classic is because we don't really want to know our history, and we'll stop writing. But we need to continue writing. The movie, Selma, written by people who had to read what happened. We know what happened. Do you understand what I'm saying? The difference is there's passion. If you lived it, amen. And then chapter 8, where have all the leaders gone? They're dying out. Therefore, you've got to what? You've got to infuse, you've got to bring out more leaders. Somebody has to take the mantle and go with it. And it can't be the same old mentality. That's why I love the life I lived. That when I left this place, I did not just stay in civil rights. There's more to life than civil rights for just black folk. There's a whole new world out there. Going to Israel 4 times and to Seoul, Korea 3 times and to Rome and all those places with 100 to 200 ministers, imams and rabbis, and you got to spend the night in one of their rooms. You better grow up. Because you've got to respect other cultures. Come on now, you got to respect other kinds of foods. You got to deal with the same kinds of traditional wear that they have. And then on down, number 9, preordained to be ordained. I didn't know I was going to be a minister. I left Albany, Georgia to go to Atlanta to become an actress. I did acting for a good 2 years. I acted with Samuel L. Jackson till he kicked me in my behind because that was a part of the skit. And I can still feel it to this day. I think arthritis set in. But anyway, Samuel L. Jackson is very, very, very rich and very popular. But it was something whereby once you ever wanted to do something and you did it and then you wanted to move on to something else. Well, that's what happened. I did that, but now my goal is to go and tell it. And when I speak, that's what I say. It's called Run and Tell It. The last one on here is The Way I See It. It's a commentary on the past, the present, and the future. But as I close, let me say this to you. In this particular book, let me just do it this way. You will see that there is the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and you will see that Title I dealt with voting, the literacy tests, poll taxes and all of that. We won't do that. We're not supposed to. 2, banned discrimination in places like hotels, motels, restaurants, theaters. How many of the college students know that? Title III, swimming pools, parks, beaches, stadiums, didn't always go there. Hello, somebody. 4 had to do with, okay, desegregate the school. So I left Monroe and went to Westover. So then 5 had to do with the Civil Rights Commission to make sure we keep the right laws going. And it goes on, but as I close, I will read to you because there's so much to tell about. And I must stand. I'm a teacher. I cannot sit here. I've been miserable since I have, believe me or not.
Use the hold the microphone.
I
Get it out of frame. There you go.
As I close, this is what I'll close with. I included in this book my last will and testament from Mary McLeod Bethune. And I want especially our young people to hear this. Not just hear it, but hear this. Because it's very, very important. And it didn't matter whether you're red, yellow, black, or white. She was speaking to the colors at the time. How many of you know we are all colored? It reads, if I have a legacy to leave my people, it is my philosophy of living and serving. Here then is my legacy. I leave you love. Love builds. It is positive and helpful. I leave you hope. Yesterday our ancestors endured the degradation of slavery, yet they retained their dignity. I leave you the challenge of developing confidence in one another. This kind of confidence will aid the economic rise of the race by bringing together the pennies and dollars of our people and plowing them into useful channels. Teach your dollars some sense. That's what I add. I leave you thirst for education. Knowledge is the prime need of the hour. I leave you respect for the use of power. Power intelligently directed can lead to more freedom. I leave you faith. Faith in God is the greatest power, but great too is faith in oneself. I leave you racial dignity. I want Negroes to maintain their human dignity at all costs. I leave you a desire to live harmoniously with your fellow men. I leave you finally a responsibility to our young children. The world around us really belongs to youth. For youth will take over its future management. I say, when I leave this world, I pray that it will be better because I had been through here and passed through here. I pray that you will be able to say the same thing. Make your own contribution. You have a dream too. Dr. King wasn't the only one with a dream. But just like I was not the only one who marched at the back of the line, thousands of youth in this country will never be noticed because they only notice the ones at the front of the line. But I decided that I will be noticed. You will not shut me out. So the best thing I say to you, you do the same thing. Make sure you do something so that people will remember that you passed this way. Thank you.
We need to give more applause to our panel. Let's give them another round of applause. We want to thank the panelists, and at this time, if there are questions or comments, we have time.
I agree with you. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Rosa Parks sat so that we could stand against racism, discrimination, and legalized segregation. Dr. King had a dream so that we would wake up, smell the coffee, and do something about what's going on. Obama ran to to fulfill our hopes and our dreams. To answer your question, I go back to the Bible. Train up a child in the way you should go. Now, you don't have to call 25 and 26 and 27-year-olds children. But you really do, and I think the sororities and the fraternities should also have, connected to their organizations, voter registration plan in place. And carry it out. Share. I don't mean just one, I mean all of them. And so to answer his question, many leaders become the leader and they don't reach out for other leaders to follow them. I have to put it that way to you. So I say somebody has to be, even in this room, wise enough to say that I can be a John Lewis, I can be a Maynard Jackson, I can be whomever, and begin to meet, even if it's just over coffee. Meet and talk about the issues that are going on in the ills of this world. I don't know if that answers your question, but we have to teach it. And it has to start at the dinner table, as I said before. It has to start at the dinner table. It has to also start in the curriculum, in the social science classroom, where I taught, so I know that there's that possibility. But if you don't teach in the curriculum, in the teacher's education program on the college level, the teachers will leave college not knowing about civil rights, and it will continue.
May I say this? This might have some political ramifications to your question. The term limits for the presidency is 8 years. There is no term limits on some of these offices. And I'm hearing and reading that some of the voters are asking for term limits. Now, I don't know, and I can't say if that's good, I can't say if that's bad, but you touched on a little biblical history there. God had judges, and Israel wanted kings. And there were, I think, 3 kings before the kingdom was divided. So over the kingdom of Israel, you had 42 kings. You had some righteous kings, you had some unrighteous kings. So, I don't know, we might be headed politically towards some term limits at some point. I don't know if that's going to be good. I don't know if that's going to be bad.
If I may add to that just for a moment. I don't think it's really Congressman Bishop or John Lewis. They basically are caught in a system where they only have one vote. I think it starts with us, the people. Sure. We have to, as I said earlier, revive the movement ourselves. Then as we revive the movement ourselves from a grassroots position, then whoever the Lord will send will come aboard. But it won't come from the top down. This movement will be just as it was in the past. It will move from the bottom up. And they only have one vote. But you talk about those 2 people. If I look right here, everyone in this room is of an age to vote. And if I took a poll, how many people will vote or voted in the last election? I bet probably not half of us in here. So I know you probably did, but what I'm saying is, but that's where we got to start back. So if you get a John Lewis or someone, whoever that person may be, we will make them a one-time representative, and when they respect the vote again, then that's when we can start making a new change about getting real justice for black people.
Okay, there was one picture back here behind me that was showing.
Excuse me, would you repeat your question?
Oh, okay. In general, he wants to know about my jail experiences as it relates to my experience, which would be just a representation of everybody else's. The idea was to intimidate. So when we were arrested, we were taken to various jails. It started out going to the jail in Albany. But as you know, and the story tells us that Chief Pritchett decided that he was going to be smarter than most folk, that he was going to bus all of the people that were arrested to various counties. I was taken to Camilla, Georgia, and you know about Leesburg and the rest of the places in Americas. But the jails were different, I guess, wherever you went. When I went to jail, it was like so many women in one big jail cell, and they had 4 beds, and they had terrible mattresses that had roaches crawling in them and out of them, and the food was thrown into the shower, and silverfish were coming out of the shower, and roaches. And so we took those mattresses and threw them in the shower. This was in Camilla. And we put those mattresses in the shower and took our coats to sleep on and our clothes. But jail is no picnic, and this is one thing. I'd like to go around the country to talk about it, not just about the civil rights in terms of being arrested that way. I went to jail, and so many others in here went to jail for a reason, for a cause. But there are people who are going to jail because. And so, to answer your question, we had grits and grease in the morning and white bread. You know the little girl, there was a blonde that had her hair up, sunbeam bread, that's the one. Never shall forget, I don't eat it. So we had grits and grease, and when I say grease, it was supposed to be gravy. We had pink rice.
What is that, pink rice?
Anybody know what pink rice is? Okay, pink rice is rice that's a big bowl, big pan of rice that's cooked with 1 tomato.
Wow.
And so what we did, we balled it up and decided we would have fun with it. But knowing that was all that we were going to be able to eat, we had to kind of curb that. But let me say this finally. When I was in Camilla, Georgia, my sister, my older sister, she's the oldest of 8, was married to Mr. Jester, who has the funeral home, had the funeral home there. That was his grandson, right? We're in the jail wanting so badly to eat. And all of a sudden, we heard one of the jailers say, "Is there a Gloria Ward in there?" So everybody saying, "Ooh, you must be in trouble because they call your name." And I said, "Well, yes." And so all of a sudden, this brown paper sack bag came through the little, what do you call it, the bottom where they just shove the food in? And they said, "That's your package." And so they were saying, "Girl, you better not open that package. You don't know what's in that package." Make a long story short, in that package was fried chicken, 5 pieces of fried chicken, 4 or 5, macaroni and cheese, collard greens, a big mason jar of tea, cornbread. I said to all the girls, y'all can look if you want to, but that chicken leg is mine, and part of that tea is mine. You can have all the rest of that stuff. So it was, when you're in jail, time is not important because you don't have anywhere to go. And then on top of that, you don't have but just 2 or 3 meals a day, so you better make it last, otherwise you'll just be hungry. So it doesn't mean that you're looking for taste, you're looking to satisfy hunger. In different jails, there were different things happening. When we were arrested in Albany, for instance, they put the guys upstairs and the girls downstairs. And there was a toilet downstairs for the girls to use. When they used the toilet, the men from upstairs could see you. So we hovered over each other when we used the restroom. So there are various stories depending on which county they were in.
Because the landmarks to which we need to return when we get to that important part of the theme of where we're going from here to where we're going. I think that one thing we must do, we must focus on education. We must educate our young people. College education is important as the new high school education. Now we have the ability to apply for jobs and job openings, but they say, now they're being cut out, but not qualified for the job. So we must always make sure that our young people are qualified by removing all the excuses. At home, we have what we call a dime fund, where we ask each person to give a dime a day, and that $36.50 is put in a pool on January 1st, and it's divided among all the kids who are going off to college. And so far, since 1995 when Shonda started, we've raised in Camilla over $70,000 to make sure that no kids use finances as a reason not to be educated. And after that, we go to what you say. The next day, we have to concentrate on businesses. I'm like, we can't expect them, C.B. King used to have the saying, we can't expect them to feed us while we fight. So we have to have our own funds. We have to have our own businesses. And we have to, as you say, believe that our chicken tastes just as good. We're cooking the chicken in the other places that you go and buy, but you won't come and buy the chicken from us. So we have to start believing in our own businesses. We have to provide, of course, to the city, same good services. So I agree with you, education and economics are very important places to which we need to return. And one more point I'm going to make, and you might disagree, Reverend Holley, and this is about the role of the churches. I think one of the worst things that happen, like you said, change the rule, sabotage strategy, is when churches start taking faith-based money, 501c3 money, and hushed us up. Because all of these movements, if you look at these screens, all of it took place in the church. The church was the central place. Now you have ministers who's afraid. I can't say that.
It's all right.
I can't
It's all right.
endorse Brother Mathis. I can't endorse Brother Hill. We can't do anything politically. And that was one of the worst moves, I think, that happened. It was a good strategic move on the other place. When we, I say, were bought off in silence with government money. So we've got to start our churches being independent again. We've got to give back voices that we had in the Civil Rights Movement.
I would like to say this to Dr. Hill on the Dawson 5. I just want to elaborate a little bit. When Miller Former and Tony Axum came to Terrell County in Dawson, Georgia, and this was a landmark case, not only did it free the 5 young men that was accused of a capital punishment crime, but also he put the city and the county on the stand. And by going back in history and letting the people know that they was putting arsenic on wieners and killing their dogs, and how they had taxpayers had a swimming pool and only whites could go to it, and in return they fill the swimming pool up with dirt so that people of color could not integrate. And secondly is that Miller Former and Tony Axum went throughout the community and organized. When they went into court, they had a chamber full of people of color. You know, if you are concerned about your relative in the hospital, it would give the nurses and doctors a little bit more incentive that the case is serious. So when the community come together, and when the lawyers add all of the dirty laundry, it brought about a change, and that's just when people of color was able to get into political office based upon these young men being accused of killing a white person in Terrell County, and was vindicated. And one thing I'd like to say to the mayor, that it's all right to have a 501c3 not connected to the church. I have a 501c3, but it don't have any relationship to the church. I would like to say to the young people, there are unlimited amount of resources out there for you to go to college if you will seek where those resources are. Scholarships is available. I think the churches, the NAACP, the fraternities, all of these people need to start trying to get funds together so we can help our students excel. But don't stop. Don't stop because you don't have, or your family don't have the money to send you to college. There is funds available, but you got to go after those funds.
May I say this before we leave? For the young people, many of you are on loans, student loans. I went to school, that's the only way I could go, was on a loan. But I want to caution you about something as it relates to economics. Holy Spirit told me to say this. When these people come on campus and offer you a credit card for you to help pay for your books, and you buy pizza for everybody in the dorm, and then you go to the movies, and then you get all that you need for getting your hair done and your nails done, and the guys take the gals out. Let me just say this. You need to just say cling-a-ling, ching-a-ling, ching-a-ling. Because what's happening is, when you finish with that $50,000 loan, You will owe $250,000
Amen.
when you get out of college, and you won't be able to realize a salary even in this lifetime. Your children won't realize a salary. So I'm cautioning you about taking those loans and those credit cards. It's so tempting. It is so tempting, but it is so devastating. And finally, the fact that they tell you to go to college and you want to go to college because you're the first person in your family that went to college. In some countries, you need to go get a college degree and you need to have a vocation. Because what happens is you're overly qualified for the jobs out there when you get the college degree. Then you sit home waiting on how can I get a job. Mm-hmm. So you need to have a vocation, you need to have education, and you do need a degree. Remember that.
Just want to say can I just say one comment, and then I'm back to your question, brother. I think what's the problem is that we don't have enough black teachers in our school system anymore to help start training and dealing with our black kids. Because I know the same problem in Thomasville is that you have the clusters of young men hanging on the corner. Then we got to go back to the homes also. We got too many housing projects that are today used as a babysitter for those moms, which is nothing wrong with it, but they're not like the housing project we started back in the 40s and the 50s, where the families lived in them, and now a single parent. But we got to go back. We got to go back and get those teachers in the classroom, black teachers that can deal with us, our kids, and that's a problem. Especially that started at 8th grade level. It's where you really in the museum. I'm getting National History Day students coming in to see and the teacher, and I know they're doing it because they're not giving it the information in the school system. They come and see what's going on in the Black History Museum. So that's all I got to say. Go ahead.
One thing about that, and I touched on it earlier, about behavior. We have to teach them that behavior. We have to retrain their minds to spend their dollars with black businesses, because we are the machine, that economic machine that runs this country. And if we would spend those dollars with black businesses right now, they, like a black restaurant, they pay almost twice as much as their competitors, so they have to charge a little more. But the quality of the food is usually always better. And so if we learn to start spending our dollars with them in their restaurants and their clothing stores, then it won't be long before they be able to compete with those chains. And then therefore we will again bring back, as what we used to call them, those mom and pop restaurants, those moms and pop stores where we used to have to shop all the time anyway before they let us go in the pennies and bills. So therefore, that's how we got to do it. We have to re-educate them and teach them that behavior, not only just in how to address society as a whole, but how to help their own community. Then it falls back on our shoulders. You have to do like my friend that came with me today, Reverend Eugene Hall, and myself. We both go to the elementary schools, the primary schools. We have developed a relationship where they do let us come and talk to the students. I've been to Georgia Southwestern University 2 times to give speeches about what and how they need to do. I've been to South Georgia Technical College and gave speeches to the groups out there about how they need and what they need to do now. So that's where it starts. It doesn't really necessarily start with you, and you're correct. It starts with us. But as you go vote, the only time your vote don't count is when you don't cast it. And as you see politicians tell you one thing and they do another one, then that's why we have to organize and regroup and make that particular candidate a one-term candidate.
May I say this, Dr. Hill, to the young man, I really admire you. There was, maybe I can give you an illustration. A young man came to me that was abusing substance. He was a substance abuser. And he said, I want to get away from the substance. And I said to him, I will do everything in my power to help you get away from this, what you depended on. We got him into rehab, and now he is in college and he's doing very well. But he still looks to me as a father, and I'm not his father. There was another young man that had graduated, no, he was a senior at Morehouse, and he got in trouble in Atlanta. And he was sentenced to life plus 25. His name was Jonathan Mayo. And Jonathan Mayo was out of Cincinnati, Ohio. His family, his mother, Ms. Patterson, got in touch with me out of Cincinnati. I went up to Cincinnati. I got familiar with his problems that he was involved in. I came back, and he was incarcerated over in Lee County Correction Institution. And Jonathan Mayo is out of prison, and he is working in Atlanta, not in a professional career, but he's doing a job, and he's going back. He's been incarcerated now for about 20 years, but he's going back to get his degree, to get back in the mainstream. So all of us have to find someone to mentor us, to be a friend to us. And I'm talking about not to exploit us, but be true to us. But the step begins with you. You got to know where you want to go, and then you can get help.
Let's thank again the panelists. And I want to personally thank each of you who responded to our call to come. We did a fine job, and I guess we have to have you back so you can tell the rest of the story. Thank you very much.